Before you watch this, I need you to know something. Some people will say I went too far, that what I did was an act of cold, calculated revenge. They're not entirely wrong, but it's important you understand that it didn't start that way. It wasn't about revenge until they tried to make me a criminal, until my own wife, the woman I loved, looked me in the eyes and asked me to trade my soul to save her skin. When you're faced with a choice like that, between your life and theirs, you find out who you really are. For a year I thought I was a gardener. It turns out, I was just the guy who was about to burn the whole rotten garden to the ground. My hands used to smell of rich soil, of lavender and freshly cut grass. It was a clean smell, an honest smell. Now they smell of betrayal. A year ago, I was just Stephen Miller, a guy who worked a steady but unexciting job in logistics, a man who found a quiet joy in the order and predictability of spreadsheets and shipping schedules. My life was a neat grid, and at the center of that grid was my wife, Holly. She was the opposite of my spreadsheets. She was vibrant, chaotic, and ambitious in a way that both thrilled and mystified me. She had a family that was even more so, the Prestons. They were loud, wealthy, and moved through the world with an effortless entitlement that I, a man from a quiet middle-class background, could only ever observe from the outside. It was Holly who had the idea for the business. She saw me one Saturday, on my knees in our backyard, meticulously planting a bed of perennials. I was lost in the work, covered in dirt, and happier than she'd seen me in years. She came out with 2 glasses of iced tea, a thoughtful look on her face. She said, "Stephen, you have a gift. You make things grow. You bring beauty out of nothing. People would pay for that. You should start a landscaping business, just on the side. A little extra cash, a little passion project." She called it Evergreen Aspirations. It was the perfect name, full of hope and life. She was so convincing, so full of belief in me. How could I say no? It felt like she was seeing a part of me that I hadn't even seen in myself. She helped with everything. She handled the LLC registration, the business bank account, the website. She said, "You just focus on the creative stuff, honey, on making things beautiful. I'll handle the boring numbers and paperwork." It felt like the perfect partnership. I was the hands, she was the head, and for a while, it was perfect. I loved it. I loved the feeling of transforming a neglected patch of lawn into a vibrant garden. I loved the physical exhaustion, at the end of the day, the kind of tired that feels earned. The clients started rolling in, and they were almost all Holly's family. Her Uncle Richard needed a few dozen tulips planted along his driveway. A simple job, took me maybe 3 hours on a Saturday morning. When I was done, he came out, clapped me on the shoulder, and handed me a thick envelope. I opened it in the car. It was $5,000. In cash. I just stared at it. I called Holly, my voice trembling a little. "Holly, your uncle just gave me $5,000 for planting tulips. This is crazy." She just laughed, that bright, breezy laugh of hers. "Oh, Stephen, don't be silly. He's just generous. He adores you, and he loves supporting family. That's just how the Prestons are." And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I wanted to believe her. It became a pattern. Her cousin Paige paid me $10,000 to trim some hedges and plant a Japanese maple. Her father, Dominic, the patriarch of the Preston clan, had me install a small stone water feature by his pool. The check he wrote was for $25,000. My little side hustle was making more money than my full-time logistics job. It felt like a dream. We were taking nicer vacations, eating at fancier restaurants. Holly would buy a new designer bag and say, "Evergreen Aspirations is a hit. You're a natural, darling." I was so caught up in the joy of the work and the thrill of the success that I let myself ignore the little red flags, the things that pricked at the edge of my conscience. The insistence on cash. The odd, disproportionate payments. The way Holly would snatch the envelopes and say, "I'll just run this to the bank for us." It was easier to believe I was a landscaping prodigy than to consider the alternative. It was easier to believe my wife's family was just incredibly, eccentrically generous. The truth, I've learned, is often the story we are least willing to tell ourselves. The illusion shattered yesterday. It was a Thursday night. Holly had come home late from a dinner with her family, flustered and rushed. She dropped her expensive leather briefcase on the entryway floor, and it sprang open. Papers, a wallet, a tube of lipstick, and a small black moleskin notebook skittered across the hardwood. I knelt to help her pick things up. As I reached for the notebook, my fingers brushed the cover. It felt like a little block of ice. I don't know why, but I opened it. It wasn't a diary, it was a ledger, and it was written in Holly's neat, precise cursive. The first page I saw laid it all out with chilling clarity. 2 columns. The first was labeled, Client Payment Official. The second, Family Contribution Actual. For Uncle Richard's tulips, the official entry was $300. The actual was $5,000. The discrepancy, $4,700, was noted in a third column labeled Wash. For Page's Hedges, official, $500, actual, $10,000. For Dominic's Fountain, official, $2,000, actual, $25,000. My blood ran cold. I flipped through the pages. It was all there. A year of my life. A year of my sweat and passion, all meticulously documented as a financial crime. There were notes in the margins, little coded references that made my stomach heave. From Dennis Shipping Issues Refund, from Jamie Warehouse Overstock Sale, from Arneshu's Consulting Fees Return. Jay was her brother Julian, a perpetual failure whose businesses always seemed to involve mysterious shipping containers and warehouses. Day was her father, Dominic. This wasn't just my business, it was their toilet. They were flushing their dirty money through my clean, honest work, through my tulips. I was still on my knees, the ledger in my hand, when Holly turned from the closet. She saw what I was holding, and for a single horrifying second, I saw her true face. Not the loving, supportive wife, but a cornered animal. The mask of surprise melted into pure, unadulterated panic. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. As if on cue, a voice from the television in the living room cut through the silence. A local news anchor with that practiced, somber tone. And sources inside the IRS have confirmed a major crackdown on tax evasion in Pine Creek County, specifically targeting small businesses operating with large cash transactions. Audits are expected to begin as early as next week. Holly's eyes darted from the ledger in my hands to the television, then back to my face. The panic in her eyes was replaced by a terrifying, desperate calculation. The color returned to her cheeks. She rushed over, kneeling in front of me, grabbing my free hand. Her own was ice cold. "Stephen," she whispered, her voice tight and shaky. "Stephen, listen to me. It's okay, we can fix this, we just need to get our story straight. We need to cook the books. Just a little. We'll create some fake invoices, say we had higher supply costs. It's easy. I already have a spreadsheet started. No one will ever know. We can fix this." She wasn't apologizing, she wasn't explaining. She was coaching, she was treating me like a co-conspirator. In that moment, staring into the eyes of the woman I had built my life with, I realized the truth. I wasn't her partner, I was her tool. I was the clean, simple, trustworthy face she put on her family's filth. Evergreen Aspirations wasn't my passion project. It was my cage. And the IRS wasn't the enemy. They were just the ones who were about to rattle the bars. Holly wasn't asking me to lie for her. She was asking me to go to prison for her, and for her family. That's when the scent of betrayal became so strong it choked me. The first sound I made was a laugh. It was a horrible, broken sound that seemed to come from someone else. Holly flinched as if I'd slapped her. Her carefully constructed composure began to crack, the desperation leaking through. "Stephen, what's so funny? This isn't funny. This is serious. Our lives are on the line." "Our lives," she said, "our lives." But what she meant was her life, her family's life. My life had just been the collateral, the acceptable loss. I stood up slowly, the ledger feeling impossibly heavy in my hand, like a tombstone. I looked down at her, still kneeling on the floor, her expensive dress pooled around her, a portrait of panicked privilege. "Get up, Holly," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of any emotion I recognized. "Stop kneeling. You're not praying for forgiveness. You're just trying to find a better angle to lie from." Her face hardened. The faux vulnerability vanished, replaced by the familiar Preston indignation. She got to her feet, brushing off her dress as if my words were dust she could simply wipe away. "How dare you? After everything my family has done for you. We gave you this business. We made you a success. You made me a money launderer." I shot back, my voice finally finding its fire. "You didn't make me a success, you made me a patsy. A fall guy. Was that the plan all along? Find a simple, honest schmuck, marry him, and then use his good name to wash your family's dirty cash. You don't understand," she cried, her voice rising. "It's complicated. It's just how things are done in my family. It's for the good of the family. It protects us. It protects you. Protects me." I held up the ledger. "This doesn't protect me, Holly. This is a one-way ticket to a federal penitentiary for me. For me, Stephen Miller, the guy whose name is on the LLC. The guy whose face is on the website, the guy whose hands are in the dirt. Your name isn't on the paperwork, is it? Your father's isn't. Julian's isn't. Just mine." The truth of it hung in the air between us, thick and toxic. She had no answer for that, because it was the unassailable truth. She had built the perfect firewall, and I was on the wrong side of it. She fell back on her standard defense, the one the Prestons always used when confronted with an ugly reality. She tried to make it about my feelings, not her actions. "You're being overly dramatic, Stephen. You're being emotional. It's just some paperwork. A few numbers. We just need to be smart about this." I spent that night on the couch in my home office, the room where Holly had first pitched me the idea of evergreen aspirations. The air was thick with irony. I couldn't sleep. I just sat there in the dark, replaying the last year in my head. But this time, with the awful clarity of the ledger's second column, every memory was tainted. Every kind word now sounded like a lie. I remembered that first day, a little over a year ago. It was a Saturday. I was sitting on the back porch, staring at our lumpy, weed-choked lawn, feeling a familiar sense of suburban listlessness. My job was fine. Our life was fine. Everything was fine. And I hated it. Holly came out, wrapping her arms around my shoulders from behind. She rested her chin on my head. "What are you thinking about, sleepyhead?" she'd asked. "Just this yard," I'd said. "It's a mess. I was thinking I could till it all up, build some raised beds, maybe a stone path, put some life into it." A slow smile spread across her face. I see it so clearly now. It wasn't a smile of love. It was a smile of opportunity. It was the smile of a predator that had just seen a particularly vulnerable gazelle. "That's a wonderful idea," she'd purred. "You know you're so good with your hands. You have a vision for things. I bet you could do this for other people too." And so it began. The next week, she had the LLC paperwork filled out. "Evergreen Aspirations, LLC," she announced, flourishing the document. "I listed you as the sole proprietor, honey. It's your baby after all. I'm just your biggest cheerleader." She'd set up the bank account too, a joint business account. "So I can help you with the deposits and paying for supplies," she'd said. "Let me handle the boring stuff. You just focus on making things beautiful." It all sounded so supportive, so selfless. I now realized she wasn't handing me a dream. She was handing me a shovel and telling me to dig my own grave. Then came the first big job, Uncle Richard's tulips. I remember being so nervous, wanting to do a perfect job to impress her family. I spent hours ensuring the spacing was perfect, the soil amended just right. When he handed me that envelope stuffed with cash, I was genuinely baffled. $5,000. It felt wrong. It felt heavy. I brought it home, and Holly was ecstatic. She'd hugged me, kissed me, told me how proud she was. "But Holly, it's too much." I'd argued, holding the stack of hundreds. The tulips cost $100. My time, maybe 200. This feels dirty. She'd smoothed my hair back, her expression one of practiced patience, the kind you'd use on a naive child. Stephen, darling, you have to understand my family. For them, money is just a tool. It's how they show love. It's how they show support. Rejecting it is like rejecting them. It's an insult. Just accept it. Think of it as a welcome to the family bonus. She'd taken the envelope from my hand. Come on. Let's go celebrate. I'll deposit this for us tomorrow. And I let her. I let her because I loved her, and because the alternative, that her family was a cabal of high-end crooks, was too monstrous to contemplate. The memory that truly curdled my stomach in the pre-dawn darkness of my office was a family brunch from about 6 months ago. These Sunday brunches at Dominic and Eleanor Preston's mansion were a weekly command performance. They were spectacles of passive aggression and performative wealth, all set to the clinking of mimosa glasses and the smell of hollandaise sauce. That particular Sunday, the guest of honor was Holly's brother, Julian. He was the golden child, the crown prince of the Preston dynasty, and an absolute wrecking ball of a human being. He'd just run his latest startup, some ludicrous venture involving artisanal blockchain-enabled dog water, directly into the ground, losing a significant amount of his father's money in the process. I watched as Dominic draped an arm around Julian's shoulders, a proud look on his face. The important thing is, you tried, son. Dominic had boomed, loud enough for the whole table to hear. You took a big swing. You only learn by failing. I'm proud of you for having the guts to lose 50 grand. Shows you've got nerve. Julian had puffed out his chest, basking in the praise. Thanks, Dad. The next one's the winner. I can feel it. Later, over dessert, Holly's mother had turned to me with a condescendingly sweet smile. And how is your little dirt business going, Stephen? Holly tells me you made almost $1,000 last month. That's just so lovely. It must be nice to have some pocket money. $1,000. She'd said it with the same tone you'd use for a child who'd successfully sold a few cups of lemonade. My $1,000 was real. It was profit earned through hard, honest labor. Julian's $50,000 loss was a write-off for some shady deal, and he was being lauded as a titan of industry. In that moment, I'd felt a deep, sharp sting of injustice. I'd looked at Holly, expecting her to defend me, to correct her mother, but she just smiled and squeezed my hand under the table, a silent plea to just play along. Don't rock the boat. I see now she wasn't just keeping the peace, she was protecting the system. My small legitimate profits were a threat to their narrative. They needed my business to be a cute little hobby, not a real enterprise, because its true purpose wasn't to make money, but to hide it. All these memories, these little cuts and compromises, swirled in my mind until they formed a single ugly tapestry of deceit. The way Holly always intercepted the cash payments. The way she'd surprise me with expensive gifts, a new watch, a weekend trip, and say the business can afford it. I thought we were a team, building a life together, but we weren't a team. I was just an asset on her family's morally bankrupt balance sheet. The sun started to rise, casting long shadows across the floor. I heard the floorboards creak outside the office door. It opened, and Holly stood there, already dressed in a sharp business suit, a travel mug of coffee in her hand. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were clear and focused. She had spent the night strategizing. She walked in and set a laptop on my desk, flipping it open. On the screen was a complex spreadsheet, full of numbers and categories. It was a work of fiction. Okay, she said, her voice all business. I was up all night. This is the plan. We're going to create a series of backdated invoices from a fictional supplier. I've already registered a domain for Pine Creek Premium Horticultural Supply. It'll look legit. We'll say we had massive upfront costs for rare soil amendments and organic fertilizers. We'll expense everything. The numbers will balance, and the cash profit will look minimal and reasonable. It's perfect. They'll never be able to prove otherwise. I stared at her, not at the spreadsheet, but at her face. There was no remorse, no apology, no acknowledgement of the profound betrayal. There was only a cold, terrifyingly competent criminal laying out the details of our conspiracy. She looked at me, expecting me to nod, to pull up a chair, to get to work on our shared lie. She was treating me not as her husband, but as her employee, the CFO, the chief fall guy officer. That was the moment the ice in my veins hardened into steel. The despair I'd been drowning in all night wasn't just sadness, it was fuel. It was a catalyst. My mind went quiet. The storm of emotions receded, leaving behind a cold, calm certainty. I was not going to jail for these people. I was not going to become a criminal to protect their corrupt empire. They had mistaken my love for weakness. They had mistaken my trust for stupidity. They were about to find out how wrong they were. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. At that moment, it was about survival. It was a calm, quiet, and absolute decision. I was getting out, and I wasn't going to be the one left holding the bag. I looked up from the spreadsheet and gave her a slow, deliberate nod. "Okay," I said, my voice steady. "You're right. This is a good plan. You'll have to walk me through it. I want to make sure I understand all the details." A wave of relief washed over her face. She smiled, a genuine, dazzling smile. She thought she'd won. She thought I was on board. "Oh, Stephen, thank you," she gushed, reaching out to touch my arm. "I knew I could count on you. I knew you understood. We're a team." I let her touch my arm. I let her believe her lie, because her arrogance was now my greatest weapon. She thought she was leading me down the path to a cover-up. She had no idea I was already walking a different path, one that led straight to her destruction. And I was going to let her hand me the map. The first step in any battle is to know your enemy. The second is to let them think they know you. Holly believed I was a simple man, a gardener who was good with his hands, but overwhelmed by the complexities of her world. She was counting on it, and I was going to play that part to perfection. For the next few days, I became the most dedicated, if slightly dim-witted, student of white-collar crime she could ever have hoped for. "Holly, I'm just not sure I get it," I'd say, frowning at her fictional spreadsheets. "This invoice for 500 bags of organic peat moss from our supplier. Where did we supposedly use all that? On your Uncle Richard's tulips? That seems like a lot of moss for a small flower bed." She would sigh, a little impatiently, but also pleased to be the expert. "No, honey, you're thinking too literally. It's not about what we actually used. It's about creating a paper trail. We just say we bought it. It's a business expense. It reduces our taxable income. See," she would point to the columns, explaining the fine art of faking costs with the pride of a master craftsman. With every question I asked, she gave me more rope. She laid out the entire fraudulent architecture of my business, piece by piece, convinced she was teaching me how to build a defense, when in reality, she was giving me a guided tour of her own prison cell. But while I was playing the fool at home, I was a man with a mission outside of it. My first secret move was to retrieve my own ledger. From the very first ridiculously large cash payment, a seed of doubt had been planted in my mind. I'm a logistics guy. I live by numbers, by data, by things that make sense. And $5,000 for a few hours of planting tulips never made sense. So I had started my own secret record. It was a simple, cheap notebook I kept hidden in a hollowed-out book titled Basic Accounting on my workshop shelf. The irony was not lost on me. In this notebook, I had documented everything. Every single job, the exact hours I worked, a detailed list of every plant, every bag of mulch, every paving stone I purchased, complete with the receipts I'd carefully saved. I took photos of every completed project on my phone, which were all geotagged and time-stamped. I had a meticulous, unassailable record of the truth. It was a chronicle of my honest work, and I now realized it was the most powerful weapon I possessed. It was the truth, written in black and white, and it stood in stark, damning contrast to the elaborate fiction Holly was spinning on her laptop. My next call was to my best friend, Mark. Mark and I have been friends since college. He's a CPA, a man whose life is even more ordered and by the book than mine. He's the kind of guy who finds a deep spiritual satisfaction in a perfectly balanced spreadsheet. I asked him to meet me for a beer at a dive bar on the other side of town, a place I knew Holly and her family would never set foot in. I laid it all out for him. The business, the cash, the ledger. I showed him the copy I had secretly made of Holly's notebook, and then I showed him mine. He listened intently, his face growing paler and grimmer with every word I spoke. When I was finished, he just stared into his beer for a long minute. "Stephen," he finally said, looking up at me, his eyes blazing with a protective fury. "I'm not your friend right now, I'm your accountant. And as your accountant, I'm telling you that your wife has not just put you in jeopardy, she has built a guillotine and put your neck in the goddamn stock. This is textbook money laundering. It's conspiracy to defraud the United States government. They're not going to give you a slap on the wrist for this. You're the sole proprietor, you're the fall guy. You're looking at prison time, serious time." Hearing it from him, so bluntly, made it terrifyingly real. I felt a wave of nausea. "So what do I do, Mark?" He leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "You get ahead of it. You get a lawyer, not just any lawyer, a shark, a former prosecutor, someone who knows how to deal with the feds, and you give them everything. Your notebook, the photos, the copy of her ledger. You position yourself as the victim, the whistleblower. It's your only move." He took a long drink of his beer. "I've been a fool myself, you know," he said, his voice tinged with a bitterness I'd never heard from him before. "My younger sister Chloe, for years, I've been paying off her credit cards, giving her loans for her rent. I kept telling myself I was helping her, that she was just going through a rough patch. But last week, I found out she used the money I gave her for her dental emergency to go on a yoga retreat in Bali. I wasn't helping her, I was enabling her. I was her Holly." It was a strange, sad moment of connection. Both of us, the responsible ones, the providers, being used by the people we were trying to help. His own small-scale betrayal made my large-scale one feel less isolating. It strengthened my resolve. "Who do I call?" I asked. Mark already had a name. Annette Albright. She's a forensic accountant who became a lawyer. She used to work for the Department of Justice. They call her the surgeon because she's precise, she's ruthless, and she cuts out the cancer. She's expensive, but believe me, she's a hell of a lot cheaper than a federal conviction. The next day I took a sick days from my logistics job and drove to a sterile, intimidating office building downtown. Annette Albright was a tall, imposing woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through me. I didn't have to do much talking. I just laid my notebook and the copy of Holly's ledger on her polished mahogany desk. She spent 20 minutes silently reading, her expression unreadable. Finally she looked up, her gaze piercing. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice crisp and devoid of sentiment, "your wife has built a very elegant cage for you. She has leveraged your good name, your work ethic, and your trusting nature to facilitate what appears to be a significant money laundering operation for her family. The IRS will not care that you were naive. They will only care that your name is on the documents." My heart sank. So Mark was right. I'm done for. "I didn't say that," she countered, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "I said your wife built a cage. The good news is, you were smart enough to keep a copy of the key." She tapped my notebook. "This is your key. This is a contemporaneous, detailed, and credible record of your actual business activities. This, contrasted with her ledger, doesn't just suggest your innocence, it proves her guilt. It proves the guilt of everyone who gave you those envelopes of cash." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. "So what's the strategy?" "The strategy is not defense," Miss Albright said, leaning back in her chair. "It's offense. We are not going to wait for the IRS to come knocking. We are going to knock on their door first. Tomorrow we will file a comprehensive whistleblower report with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. We will submit your affidavit, your records, your photos, and your copy of their ledger. We will frame you as the cooperating witness, a man who discovered his business was being used for illicit purposes and is now bravely coming forward to make it right. You are not the target, Mr. Miller. You are the government's star witness. She then laid out the next steps, each one a perfectly calculated move on a chessboard. I was only just beginning to understand. First, I was to go to my bank and open a new account in my name only, then transfer my personal savings, the money I had before my marriage to Holly, into it. Second, she would file for divorce on my behalf. A divorce? I stammered. Already, it's not personal, Mr. Miller, it's tactical, she explained. It legally separates you from her and her family's criminal liability. It establishes a clear line of demarcation. The moment you file, you are no longer her partner, you are her legal adversary. It protects your assets from being seized along with hers. We will also petition to freeze all joint assets, including the business account, pending the investigation, citing potential fraudulent activity. We are going to cut off her oxygen supply. I walked out of her office, feeling like a different man. The fear was still there, but it was now overlaid with a sense of purpose, a cold, hard clarity. This was no longer just about survival. This was about justice. The word echoed in my mind. Justice, back at home. I played my part. I sat with Holly at the dining room table, our heads bent over her fraudulent spreadsheets, like a normal couple doing their taxes. So for the $25,000 from my father, she said, pointing at a line item. We'll say we purchased a mature cherry tree from a specialty nursery in Oregon and paid for expedited shipping. I'll create the invoice tonight. Can you think of anything else that sounds expensive? I looked her right in the eye. My face a mask of earnest cooperation. What about the labor? Installing a big tree like that is hard work. We should probably bill for at least 50 hours of labor for 2 men, right? And we'd need to rent a small crane. That's got to be a few $1,000s right there. She beamed at me, genuinely impressed. Stephen, that's brilliant. See, you're getting the hang of this. You're a natural, a natural. The words hung in the air. I was a natural, all right. A natural at letting her believe she was in complete control, while the ground was systematically crumbling beneath her feet. Every suggestion I made, every detail I added to her fictional world, was another nail I was letting her hammer into her own coffin. It wasn't about revenge, I told myself again. It was about seeing things through to their logical conclusion. She had started a game of high-stakes fraud, and I was simply going to let her play it out to the end. The only thing she didn't know was that I was the one who was about to flip the table over. The plan Miss Albright had laid out was a masterclass in controlled demolition. It began not with a bang, but with a quiet legal earthquake. The first tremor hit on a Tuesday morning. I waited until Holly left for her yoga class, a class paid for, I now knew, with laundered money, and then I made my move. I went to the bank and executed the plan precisely as instructed. I opened a new personal account and transferred every penny of my premarital savings into it. Then I went to Miss Albright's office and signed the divorce papers and the petition to freeze our joint assets. The documents were filed before noon. The silent takeover had begun. The first indication that the tremor had reached Holly's world came not from her, but from her father. Dominic Preston called me that afternoon. His voice, usually a booming instrument of paternalistic authority, was a low, dangerous purr. "Stephen," he began, without any preamble. "I just received a call from Holly. She's very upset. She mentioned something about a divorce. I think there must be some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, Dominic," I said, my voice calm and steady, just as Miss Albright had coached me. There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, shifting from feigned concern to intimidation. "Son, you're part of this family, and we take care of our own, but we also expect loyalty. Don't make a foolish emotional decision that you'll spend a very long time regretting." It was a threat wrapped in the language of family. I'm just following my lawyer's advice, Dominic, I replied. The phrase a shield Miss Albright had given me. You should probably get one of your own. I hung up before he could respond. My hand was shaking, but my voice had not. That felt like a victory. Holly arrived home an hour later. She burst through the door, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. She was waving a piece of paper in her hand. A divorce? Are you insane? She shrieked, her voice echoing in the foyer. Now, of all the times to pull a stunt like this? We are in a crisis, Stephen. We are supposed to be a team, facing this together. I've decided I'd rather face it alone, I said quietly, not looking up from the newspaper I was pretending to read. Face what alone? The audit? We have a plan for that. Our plan. What is wrong with you? Her anger was quickly curdling into panic. She had just come from the bank, where she'd discovered that her keycard to our financial world no longer worked. I tried to pay for gas on the way home, she said, her voice dropping, becoming more shrill. The card was declined. Our joint accounts, the business account, they're frozen. The bank manager said there was a legal hold. What did you do, Stephen? I protected myself, I said, finally folding the newspaper and looking at her. It's called an asset freeze. It's standard procedure when one party in a divorce suspects the other of financial misconduct. The color drained from her face. She finally understood. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was a calculated, strategic move. Her fall guy was refusing to fall. Financial misconduct. You're accusing me. You're the one who ran the business. Did I? I asked softly. Did I handle the books? Did I make the deposits? Did I decide how much to charge your family for my work? No, Holly. You did all of that. I just planted the tulips. The panic in her eyes was now absolute. Her world, built on a foundation of lies and easy money, was beginning to shake. Her access to the slush fund was gone. She couldn't pay for her yoga classes, her designer clothes, her brother's next doomed venture. The calls started, one after another. Her uncle, her cousin, her mother. A chorus of panicked, accusatory voices all asking the same question. What did I do? For the first time, the Prestons were feeling the consequences of their actions, and they didn't like it one bit. The final piece of the plan fell into place 3 days later. The mail arrived, and in it was a thick, ominous envelope from the Internal Revenue Service. It was addressed to Evergreen Aspirations, LLC. The official audit notice. It was exactly what Miss Albright had predicted. My whistleblower report had triggered an immediate full-scale audit. Holly saw the envelope on the kitchen counter and snatched it up. She tore it open, her hands trembling. A flicker of something that looked like triumphant relief crossed her face. She thought this was it. The start of the battle she had been preparing for. She thought I was still on her team. She looked at me, a strange, feverish light in her eyes. Okay, honey, she said. Her voice a conspiratorial whisper. This is it. Showtime. Let's get the laptop. Let's go over our story one more time. We need to be perfect. She was pulling out her fake spreadsheets, ready to rehearse the grand performance that would save her family. I didn't move. I just took a sip of my coffee and looked at her over the rim of the mug. There's no our story, Holly, I said, my voice gentle but firm. There's only one story. The truth. She stared at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. What are you talking about? The truth will land us in jail. No, I corrected her. The truth will land you in jail. I told them the truth already. I watched as the meaning of my words slowly dawned on her. The confusion in her eyes gave way to horrified comprehension, then to a bottomless, soul-shattering betrayal. She finally understood that the enemy wasn't the IRS. The enemy was me. The audit wasn't a random attack. It was a surgical strike that I had called in myself. She opened her mouth to speak, but all that came out was a strangled gasp. The confident, calculating woman who had a plan for everything was gone. In her place was a terrified stranger in my kitchen, staring at the man who had just single-handedly dismantled her entire world. The silent takeover was complete. The house of Preston was about to fall. The aftermath of that revelation was not a storm, but a chilling, unnatural silence. Holly just stood there for what felt like an eternity. The audit letter dangling from her fingers, her face a pale, frozen mask. The intricate web of lies she had so carefully woven had not just unraveled. I had taken a blowtorch to it. When she finally moved, it was to slowly back away from me, as if I were a venomous snake she had just discovered in her bed. She fled upstairs, and I heard the bedroom door slam shut with a finality that echoed through the house. The silence didn't last long. Within the hour, the family's panic, which had been simmering for days, boiled over. The first call was from her brother, Julian. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "What the hell did you do, Miller?" He spat into the phone. "Holly just called me, hysterical. Something about you talking to the feds. You rat. You're trying to sink us to save your own skin." "I'm just telling the truth, Julian," I said, recording the call as Miss Albright had instructed. "The truth about the warehouse overstocks money you funneled through my company." The investigator seemed very interested in that. There was a choked sound on the other end of the line, then a string of curses before he slammed the phone down. One by one, they started to turn on each other, just as Miss Albright had predicted. The family, which had seemed like an impenetrable fortress bound by loyalty, was proving to be nothing more than a criminal conspiracy of convenience. The moment a real threat appeared, their first instinct was self-preservation. Uncle Richard called next, his voice slick with a desperate, feigned friendliness. "Stephen, my boy, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. That $5,000, that was a gift, a housewarming gift for you and Holly. It had nothing to do with the tulips. You know that, right? We can tell them that. A gift that was deposited directly into a business account and then documented in a secret ledger as a wash." I asked politely. "That's going to be a hard story to sell, Richard. But feel free to try." He hung up. The most telling sign of the power shift was that Dominic didn't call at all. The patriarch, the man who commanded loyalty through a mixture of fear and largesse, went silent. He was circling the wagons, trying to figure out how to cut his losses, and it was clear that his daughter Holly, the architect of the scheme that had brought this hellfire down upon them, was now seen as a liability. Holly herself emerged from the bedroom a few hours later. Her strategy had shifted. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperate, cloying campaign of manipulative sentimentality. She found me in the backyard, where I was methodically pulling up the rose bushes she had always loved. She came and stood beside me, her arms wrapped around herself. "These were my favorites," she said softly, her voice thick with manufactured emotion. "They were." I agreed, yanking another one out by the roots. "But they're tainted now. I look at them, and all I can see is your cousin Paige's $10,000 hedge trimming payment." Tears welled in her eyes. It was a masterful performance. "Stephen, please," she whispered, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. "Don't do this to us. Think of everything we had. Our trip to Italy, our first Christmas in this house. Was all of that a lie? Did none of it mean anything to you?" "It meant everything to me," I said, my voice raw with a pain that was all too real. "That's the problem, Holly. It was real for me. For you, it was just the cost of doing business. For you, I was an asset, a clean name, a cover story. Did you ever love me, or did you just love my credit score and my lack of a criminal record?" The question hit home. Her tears faltered. She couldn't answer it, because we both knew the real answer. She tried a different tactic. "Guilt. You're going to send my father to jail? He's an old man, Stephen. He has a heart condition. This could kill him. Your father has been a willing participant in a criminal enterprise for years," I said coldly. "He built an empire on shady deals and laundered money. If he has a heart attack, it won't be because of me. It will be because his bill has finally come due. You all thought you were above the law. You're about to find out you're not." Her desperation reached its peak a few days later. She showed up at Mark's apartment. He called me the moment she left. "You're not going to believe this," he said, a note of disgust in his voice. "Holly just came to my door crying her eyes out. Said you were having some kind of breakdown, that you were paranoid and delusional, and that I, as your best friend, needed to talk some sense into you before you destroyed your life over nothing." "What did you do?" I asked. I told her that I knew everything, and that the only person who was delusional was her. If she thought for 1 second I would take her side over yours, Mark said. I told her to get off my property before I called the police. He paused. Seeing her like that, so willing to lie, to manipulate, it was like looking at my sister Chloe in a funhouse mirror. It made everything so clear. I called Chloe after she left. I told her the bank of Mark was officially closed. For good. She screamed. She cried. She called me every name in the book. But you know what, Stephen? It feels good. It feels clean. His small victory was a balm to my own bruised soul. We weren't just surviving, we were cutting out the poison. Holly's final, pathetic attempt at counter-manipulation came via text message. It was a long, rambling message, sent late at night, a cocktail of pleading, threats, and most importantly, admissions. You have to stop this, Stephen. You're tearing my family apart over a few bookkeeping errors. I only did it to help us get ahead. I know it was wrong, but I did it for us. You can't just turn me in like this. We can still fix it. Just tell them you were confused. I read the text message twice, then forwarded it directly to Miss Albright, with a simple note, more fuel for the fire. Her reply came a minute later. This is excellent. She's confessing in writing. They are more panicked than I even anticipated. Now they will be ready for a meeting. The call from Dominic's lawyer came the next day, formally requesting a sit-down, all of them, at the Preston mansion. They wanted to negotiate a surrender, but on their terms. They still believed they held some of the cards. They still believed they could intimidate the simple gardener into a deal. We'll go, Miss Albright said over the phone, but we don't go alone, and we don't go to negotiate. We go to read them their rights. Walking up the stone path to the imposing front door of the Preston mansion felt surreal. A year ago I had walked this same path to attend their self-congratulatory brunches, always feeling like an outsider, a guest in a world I didn't belong to. This time, I was walking in as the executioner, and beside me was Annette Albright, a she-wolf in a tailored suit. They were all there, assembled in Dominic's cavernous, wood-paneled study. Dominic himself sat behind his massive mahogany desk like a king holding court. Holly and her mother sat on a leather sofa, their faces pale and strained. Julian and Uncle Richard stood by the fireplace, trying to look imposing but just looking nervous. They had their own lawyer there, a slick, silver-haired man named Harrison, who looked like he'd been grown in a lab to represent wealthy criminals. They were expecting me to come in, hat in hand. They were not expecting Miss Albright. Her presence immediately changed the temperature in the room. Harrison started, his voice smooth as oil. Stephen, we're all very glad you came. My clients are prepared to be generous. They understand there have been some misunderstandings, some unorthodox financial arrangements. They are prepared to offer you a very substantial divorce settlement, in addition to a fund to handle any potential tax liabilities you might face from this unfortunate audit. He was offering me a bribe, a final insulting attempt to buy my silence. I didn't say a word, I just looked at Miss Albright. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. She stood up, placing a thin briefcase on the corner of Dominic's desk. Mr. Harrison, she began, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. Let's dispense with the pleasantries. We are not here to discuss a divorce settlement. We are here to inform your clients of the reality of their situation. She opened the briefcase and took out a single file. As of 3 days ago, my client Mr. Miller was granted official whistleblower status by the Internal Revenue Service. His testimony and evidence are now under federal protection. The evidence includes a detailed ledger kept by your client, Miss Holly Miller, documenting a systematic, year-long money laundering scheme. It also includes Mr. Miller's own meticulous records, which provide a clear and damning contrast. And as of last night, it includes text messages from Miss Miller confessing to the scheme and attempting to coerce a witness. She let that hang in the air. The color drained from Harrison's face. He knew what that meant. This wasn't a negotiation, it was an autopsy. Given the coordinated nature of the deposits from multiple family members and the coded notes referring to the sources of the funds, Miss Albright continued, her voice hardening, we believe the U.S. Attorney's Office will be very interested in exploring this not just as tax fraud, but as a potential RICO case, a conspiracy. That carries a penalty of up to 20 years in prison, per person. A choked sob escaped from Holly's mother. Julian looked like he was going to be sick. Dominic's face was a mask of stone, but a muscle was twitching violently in his jaw. Then for the first time I spoke. I didn't look at Dominic or his lawyer. I looked directly at Holly. You asked me if our life was a lie, I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the silent room. The life was real. My love was real. My work was real. You were the lie, Holly. You took something I loved. Something that was pure and honest. The feeling of creating a garden, and you turned it into a crime scene. You didn't love me. You loved my clean record. You loved that I was too trusting to see what you were doing. And when you got caught, you didn't apologize. You didn't try to protect me. You handed me a spreadsheet and asked me to go to prison for you. I turned my gaze to Dominic. You talk about family. You talk about loyalty. This isn't a family. It's a criminal enterprise with a brunch menu. You don't protect each other. You just use each other. And you used me. You thought I was just the help, the simple gardener who wouldn't ask any questions. I stood up, my legs feeling steady and strong. Well, the gardener is done. The garden is dead. I looked at Harrison. Miss Albright has my contact information. Your clients have one choice: full cooperation. If they choose to fight, we will be more than happy to let this play out in a federal courtroom. I suspect a jury will be very interested in the story of how the wealthy Prestons exploited their hard-working son-in-law. Miss Albright closed her briefcase with a sharp final click. You have 24 hours to contact us with your decision, she said. And with that, we turned and walked out of the room, leaving the entire Preston dynasty sitting in the ruins of their own making. The silence behind us was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. The aftermath was not a dramatic explosion, but a slow, inevitable collapse. The Prestons, faced with the undeniable evidence and the looming threat of RICO charges, did the only thing people like them ever do when truly cornered. They turned on each other to save themselves. Miss Albright's phone rang less than 12 hours after our meeting. It was Harrison. His clients were ready to cooperate. Each of them scrambled to get the best deal, to paint themselves as a minor player, and point the finger at someone else. It was a masterclass in familial disintegration. The divorce was finalized with breathtaking speed. In the end, there was nothing to fight over. The joint accounts were empty, seized by the feds. The business, Evergreen Aspirations, was dissolved, its assets liquidated to pay off a mountain of tax penalties. I kept the house. It was a premarital asset, a simple fact that Holly, in her grand scheming, had overlooked. She walked away with nothing but her expensive clothes and a pending federal indictment. Justice, when it finally comes, is often a quiet, bureaucratic affair. There were no dramatic courtroom showdowns. Dominic and Uncle Richard, the old guard, took plea deals. They leveraged their age and supposed health problems to avoid prison time, but they were hit with crippling fines that wiped out a huge portion of the Preston fortune. They had to sell their mansion to pay the government. Their social standing in the community evaporated overnight. They became pariahs. Julian, the golden child, fared worse. His history of failed, shady businesses made him a more attractive target for the prosecution. They made an example of him. He ended up with an 18-month sentence in a low-security federal prison. His nerve didn't seem so impressive anymore. And Holly the architect, got the worst of it. Because she had been the one to create the ledgers, the one who had directly orchestrated the laundering through my business, and the one who had attempted to coerce a federal witness, she was charged with a litany of crimes. Her father, in a final act of self-preservation, offered up testimony against her in exchange for a lighter sentence for himself. He threw his own daughter under the bus to save a few more dollars. She was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud and money laundering. I don't know the exact length of her sentence. I made a conscious choice not to follow it. Her story was over for me. As for me, my life got quiet. It got clean. For a long time, I couldn't even look at a garden. The smell of soil and flowers was tied to the memory of betrayal. But slowly, that began to fade. One day, I found myself driving past a neglected, overgrown lot in a rundown part of town. It was a community space that had fallen into disrepair. On a whim, I pulled over. I spent the rest of the afternoon just pulling weeds. It was hard work. It was honest. And no one handed me an envelope full of cash at the end of it. I started a new project. Not a business, just a garden. I worked with the city to take over that neglected lot, and with a few other volunteers from the neighborhood, we turned it into a community garden. We built raised beds and planted vegetables and flowers. We gave the food to a local shelter. The feeling of my hands in the dirt was good again. It was pure. I had taken back the thing they had tried to ruin. Mark, my friend, my voice of reason, found his own peace as well. He stuck to his guns with his sister. It was a painful process, but eventually she hit her rock bottom and for the first time asked for real help, not just a handout. They started going to family therapy. It was a start. He told me that seeing me refuse to be a victim gave him the courage to do the same. Sometimes, drawing a line in the sand doesn't just save you, it shows others that they can do it too. I sometimes see Holly's mother or her cousins around town. They look different now. Smaller, stripped of their wealth and their arrogance, they just look like tired, bitter people. They never meet my eye, they just hurry past, ghosts of a life they blew up with their own greed. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But looking back, I don't think what I did was revenge. It was surgery. It was a necessary amputation. Holly and her family had a sickness, a deep, corrupting belief that they were better than everyone else, that the rules didn't apply to them, and that family was a shield they could use to justify any crime. They believed that their love and support was something they could bestow upon you, and in return, you owed them your silence, your compliance, even your freedom. But a family built on lies is just a house of cards. A business built on crime is a ticking bomb. All it takes is one person, just one, refusing to play their assigned role, to finally say no, for the entire rotten structure to collapse under its own weight. I was supposed to be their foundation. It turns out I was the detonator. They didn't just lose their money and their freedom. They lost the one thing they thought they could always count on. A good man to take the fall. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your kindness was mistaken for weakness? Have you ever had to make a hard choice to protect your own integrity, even if it meant blowing up a relationship or a family dynamic? Share your stories in the comments below. I read them all, and your experiences matter. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that you're out there, and it helps more than you know. Thank you for listening.